I have chosen today for my subject to talk about the risky business of comedy. So of all of the genres, right, in my opinion, comedy is the commercially riskiest, right, in terms of guaranteeing quality of content, right, of attracting investment and also of driving revenues. It doesn't travel well, right, either kind of culturally or linguistically, right? So the largest English-speaking territory is obviously America. There's some exceptions, but fundamentally British humour doesn't go down that well in America. Right? Comedy often ages really badly too, right, in terms of pace and subject, all right, and relevance. You know, think, you said looking around, yeah, one or two of you might remember, so think On the Buses, all right, All Till Death Us Do Part. Right? These things just disappear, right, off the planet after a while. There are some exceptions, like this 53-year-old comedy brand. So 53 years old, that product went on sale in Aldi 6 weeks ago, right, and is their top-selling gift for Father's Day. So you get it right, it's got that kind of durability, right, in a way that you just might not otherwise really have thought. So comedy also easily falls foul, all right, of sort of societal changes, right, and you need to think no more really than sexism and racism, all right, because it is rife in all of it. So obviously Benny Hill, all right, or Only When I Laugh, right, if you can ever remember that one, or Love Thy Neighbour, which is truly extraordinary, right, kind of show. And even you might recall last year Fawlty Towers, and the BBC attacked Fawlty Towers, all right, for being inappropriate, all right, with a couple of the episodes, and indeed took it off, all right, the channel until John Cleese punched his way back, literally punched his way back in. Actually, I can't say that, can I? Came out fighting, right, and defending, you know, the series. But so that's how sensitive, right, it can be, all right, if the host is actually deciding to stop these things as well. So consequently, comedy is targeted a lot, all right, with rules and red lines. Don't do this, don't do that, right, and so on. And I've brought along this, which I'll show you like that, is a copy of the BBC Variety Programme's Policy Guide of 1948. All right, it's quite a slim volume, right? But it's packed, right, with an enormous amount of swathing. You can't do this, you can't do that. So all the stuff that you'd expect about politics, all right, about vulgarity, about commercial stuff, all right, and the rest of the kind of thing there. Absolutely all of it's in here, just 16 pages. Right? They've also managed to get some real detail in here as well. Page 13, impersonations, absolutely under no conditions, no circumstances whatsoever you're allowed to impersonate Winston Churchill, Gracie Fields, right, Vera Lynn, and frankly a whole load of people I've never heard of, right, which is kind of peculiar in these things. On vulgarity, right, they're very explicit, right, and you'll see a common thread running through this. So there is an absolute ban on jokes about lavatories, effeminacy in men, immorality of any kind, and suggestive references to honeymoon couples, we know what they're up to, chambermaids, we know what they're up to, fig leaves, we know why they're there, prostitution, obviously, animal habits, e.g. rabbits, right? And my particular favourite, ladies' underwear, for example, winter draws on. Right? So it was all nicely, succinctly put together in all of that, right? And I got that republished 20 years ago, right, or something, just as a piece of jollity to share with producers around the thing there. Now, 70 years later, here's the 360-page guide to do's and don'ts, right? In fairness, across the whole piece, not just variety and entertainment kind of programs, all rather beautifully summed up by the DG at the time of writing, right? Which was actually In a perfect world, the guidelines would consist of just of one sentence, really. Use your own best judgment. So extremely strict red lines, about what people can do and kind of not do. Just to consider, some of the other genres, and to sort of demonstrate really how, of course they're risky, but they're just not as risky as the comedy stuff commercially. So natural history. So when Planet Earth kind of came along, the brief that we were given to invest in it, and that kind of stuff is, look, this is a 4 or 5 year project, using, a significant budget, but the world's greatest natural history producers, the world's greatest natural history photographers, writers and so on, and of course getting the legendary Sir David Attenborough to script, and narrate the whole thing. So it was no surprise really that it came out as brilliantly as it kind of did. And then from a commercial point of view, and the reason I've put this up, this gratuitously self-congratulatory picture up, is because we ended up selling 5 million copies of Planet Earth in America at $80 a time. And do the math, as they so delightfully kind of say. And as a consequence, on that alone, we're awarded the Queen's Award for Enterprise. So yes, risky, but just not the kind of risky stuff that we'll explore really in comedy in a moment. Take another genre. So science fiction. So again, when I met up with Russell T Davies, just as he was reimagining this, probably the best TV picture, of all time, an extraordinary kind of force of nature, that the guy is. So he's not only reinvented Doctor Who, which is, as you'll all recall, was floundering away 15 years earlier, he comes up with a BBC programme, the Sarah Jane Adventures, and then also that well-known anagram, Torchwood, so he absolutely redefines the franchise and reignites the passion in the world for that kind of global kind of fan base. So again, I would argue that actually you get that kind of talent mobilised on these kind of things, and that the risk for investment and the programme making is relatively low. And one final example, really. So drama. So drama is the dramas sell all around the world. They're easy to dub, they're easy to subtitle, they're often based on a fantastically well sold book, or a character, so Sherlock and the rest of it. So you bring along the genius of Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, let them reimagine it in a modern day setting, and the rest of it, and of course then cast these two guys in it, and of course you get absolutely brilliant show. So again, huge talent really cuts the risk massively out of all of these things. So even if you take a sort of show like Only Fools and Horses, so endlessly topping the polls of most loved sitcoms, kind of in the UK, has never succeeded, in the States, And it's the sort of subtle cultural difference. It's not because Del Boy's doesn't look like Matt LeBlanc, and that kind of sort of stuff. It's because at its heart, he's a kind of market trader of dodgy stuff, and Americans just don't have that. It just does not compute, for them at all. In fact, there's only one other country in the world, that enjoys Only Fools and Horses more than the UK does. Any takers? Not Australia, In fact, it's been launched 3 times in Australia and failed, in all of these things. India, you'd think, but hasn't embraced it. It's Serbia, So Serbia, not that I've been there, but Serbia has got a complete trading kind of culture, so they totally get it. It's a bit frustrating in terms of TV sales around the world. And just to kind of show to the point, this is Boise. Hopefully you're not too highbrow to know who Boise is. In Serbia, with a mural, obviously of Del Boy. So there's There's statues there, there's restaurants there, there's murals, you know, kind of around the place. It is extraordinary, really, just how much, all right, they love him. So you need a bit of TV time, right? If you're going to do a drama, you know, yes, you can do it in 60 minutes, or all right, but more often, you know, it's going to be 3 or 6 part series, right, for any of these things. Comedy, you're never quite sure what the best duration is, right? So I've just tried to select 3 recent kind of examples. So this was funny last year. Support bubbles have been such an important part of this year, drinking a glass of Prosecco. The rest of the world practically never invests in a comedy that's made in the UK. So, and it doesn't matter really almost who it is, they just do it. So when the Office came to get originally presented, right, and that kind of stuff, right, I happen to know there was actually not that much interest even from the commissioner, right? When we presented it around to TV buyers around the world, I mean, kind of knowing what the answer was going to be anyway, the answer's no, right? So the only time that you then actually really get any TV sales out of these things is after it's been a huge hit in a particular territory, and obviously in this conversation in the UK. So unlike a drama, and I'm not being disparaging of any of these things, I might add, but something like, you know, Death in Paradise, which I'm sure everybody's seen at some moment or other, and of course it's filmed on a French island. Well, there's the French investment just immediately straight in there, kind of no questions kind of asked really. Or Father Brown, the detective series, right? So a detective priest. So that means that Spain, France, Italy, right, etc., all just write the check and just send it over, right? So obviously life's not quite that easy, or kind of, but it is relatively black and white, and it certainly feels like that relative to the kind of efforts that go into the kind of comedy state. So I don't mean that from people like my point of view as an investor and a driver of revenues from it, but from the talent's point of view. You know, do you remember a series called Rev, right? Which is won all sorts of BAFTAs and awards, and it's a C of E priest, all right. And the producer I know really well, Kenton Allen, right, at Big Talk, and I just said to him, "Why did you do a C of E priest? Where on earth do you think that is going to appeal? What, you think that the rest of Europe is going to think that, well, oh, so the priest's married? It just doesn't remotely get off the ground, right? Kind of for these things. Anyway, so for some, football might be a matter of more important than life or death, right? But it's the power of laughter, right, which is really in the same space. So I put on a show in Edinburgh, an in-conversation show, right, in a relatively unpretentious, right, kind of space, right, a few years ago, and I'd missed the deadlines for all of the posters, right, that you see gratuitously around the place there, and then actually a couple of the guests changed with 4 days to go. So I was slightly stuffed, and I was in one of the large assembly rooms, right, that had up to 750 people in it. Right? So I had myself, all right, and my daughters, right, who are probably quite easy to recognise in the room, and an A5 flyer, right? And we sold for the next 5 nights 3,000 tickets, possibly the most successful launch of a show ever in Edinburgh, right? And what put me onto the kind of giving me the kind of confidence to do it was I spoke to actually Andrew Maxwell, and he sort of said, look, don't worry about it. Don't worry, you haven't got any posters, right? And that's fallen over, and that person can't come in and do an interview, right? And that kind of stuff. He said the thing you've got to remember about Edinburgh is an audience looking for an act, right? Whereas the rest of the year, the act is desperately looking for an audience. So that put a little bit of confidence, right, kind of in me, and meant that I, frankly, within 48 hours had completely lost my voice from just talking to thousands upon thousands, well, hundreds upon hundreds of people and flying them out and the rest of the kind of thing. So Edinburgh's just an extraordinary place. So arena tours, right? You can see I was excited when we kind of, when I first arrived in here this afternoon, thinking, great, I'm scalable, right? I look, anyway. that never try to be funny, really. It's just, it's not in your kind of nature. So I vaguely thought, and again, I've got no empirical data to back this up. Go away, sorry. Is that I suspect, for the sake of argument, of those 2,000 comedians, there's probably 100 millionaires. There's probably 400 making a perfectly decent living, right? And the remainder are on the breadline. So it's a tough game. Now, theoretically, there are lots of TV opportunities. Right? I'll be quick with this, really. So you get Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, and that kind of sort of stuff. So America's Got Talent. Have you ever heard of a comedian called Tape Face? He's a mime artist with black gaffer tape on his mouth. He's hysterically funny. Right? He sell out shows in Edinburgh for a few years. Couldn't break out for love nor money. Went to America. Part of the reason was his act involved great music. Right? And of course, he could never get the rights for the music in the UK to then get translated onto a TV show. Right? Go to America's Got Talent. They write the thing there. He's got residency now in Vegas. Right? And then just an extraordinary kind of route. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, do you know what? Comedians are seriously clever. I've never seen anything which has documented their IQ, right, that kind of sort of stuff. They quite like a bit of showboating. Well, obviously in the nature of what they do on stand-up, they certainly kind of do that. So I've just used 3 examples really. Stephen Fry needs no other real explanation really, kind of for that. Stuart Lee, you probably all be familiar with Stuart Lee, right? More your North London version of Stephen Fry, right? Edgier, right? Sort of more urban. Right, in many respects, but so Stephen goes to Cambridge, Stuart Lee goes to Oxford, and. Johnny Vegas, you're familiar with Johnny Vegas? Yeah. Johnny Vegas, regarded as probably having one of the highest IQs in the entire comedy industry, even though he didn't goofball about, but you just never think about it from knowing. So he's got a 3rd-class degree in pottery from Eccles Hill College. Right, and yet he's one of the world's greatest comic improvisers. Right? He's got a pot, not this one, but he's got a pot at the V&A, right? And he's also a kind of fantastic actor, right? With in a whole variety of shows. So there's some clever guys about. The next little gang are also super smart. All right, but they were also super successful, or these ones were also super successful, super quick, which I knew was probably a mistake when I kind of scribbled it down really, but it's in there. So Jimmy Carr and John Bishop, the thing that they've got in common, apart from being super quick in their success rate, was that they both came to comedy actually in their 30s, right? So, they both had a life. They'd also both had a career, and it is no coincidence, in my opinion, that they were both extremely successful marketing directors and sales directors, respectively. Right? So they kind of understood how they needed to define the proposition, right? How they needed to get the messages kind of out there, right, and leave it on there. So Jimmy Carr, in my view, is quite American in his style, right, with that kind of thing there. And the truth is that within a couple of years, he was doing arena shows, and Channel 4 snapped him up, right, immediately. And he's just been on an endless variety of shows, hosting them, right, in that slick American kind of style of way. John Bishop, much gentler, much more rambling, scouse stories, family stories, about his sons, about his wife, messing stuff up, right, and the rest of the kind of sort of stuff there. And in some respects, it's a strange word really, but quite often what's used when people are assessing comedians is they sort of say, actually, do you know what? He's likable or she's likable, right? Because it just sort of transcends, right, everything else about them. You're drawn to them, right, and want them. And John Bishop has got that in spades, whether it's, the combination of the dimple in his cheek, the twinkle in his eye, all right, the scale of his teeth, all right, the physicality, right, everything there. If you go to a John Bishop gig, right, or an arena tour, there are packs, right, of admirers, right, wandering around just wanting to attack him, right? It is a It's a curious thing. Unsurprisingly, he's done something on every channel. He's had an original commission on every channel that I could think of in the UK. Right? So he's got that everyman kind of stuff. And Russell Howard, the guy I was talking about before, are you familiar with Russell Howard? So Russell Howard is 39, all right, I think, but actually he's been at the top of his game now for, it feels like 20 years, but it's probably 16 years, right, or something like that. So this is a guy from the West Country. He's a very funny comedian, right? and he is kind of the epitome of pin-up boy comedy, 24-year-old, living the life, poking the fun at things, right, getting on with stuff, right, and the rest of the kind of thing there. So he's had 10 series, right? So even though a lot of you haven't seen him, he's had 10 series on BBC Three that then morphed into BBC Two. Right? He had, in 2015, he got commissioned for a show on Comedy Central, right, just in there. And then in 2017, the show that he had on the BBC for 10 series, it's a sort of news hour it's called, just morphed over, right, kind of onto Sky. So he's been brilliantly managed, right? He's brilliantly talented, right? And just a different kind of success path, right, that he's had. So as we know about all sorts of things in TV, particularly, right, and particularly in drama, it's all about the writing. Right? So you can have all the rest of the kind of stuff kind of going on the web, but if the writing's no good, you're there. So it's as true for stand-up, right, as it is true for programs of really any genre. Quickly moving on to a couple of other ways of making some serious revenue is to reformat. And the single best example of that is when The Office migrated to America. So the truth is, the East and West Coast quite like the UK Office. It did get a Golden Globe, so they liked it a lot. Right? But actually, if you've watched the American version, it's a much more sanitized, much gentler, right, kind of show, right, than there. But you know, whatever it is, 8 series kind of later, right, that is the bones of his fortune, right, before all of the rest of the commissions kind of came along. Another smart thing to do, right, as we've done on Only Fools and Horses, is recreate as a stage musical. Right? So that launched in February 2019. Right, smash hit in the West End. It's just hasn't gone anywhere around the country. All right, so that's gone there. Comes back into the West End, hopefully in October, for the new kind of run. And because you're a technology crowd, I was told, I put in a technology slide. There you go. And just very crudely sort of split it into home entertainment, sort of social media, which I've just used as a generic term, and broadcast. So of those home entertainment formats, right, I'll just pick out DVD because DVD has been, in the entertainment and the comedy business, massively important commercially over the last 20 years. Not today, but from 1997 through until 2013-14, absolutely massive thing there. The fastest uptake of a consumer technology ever in the history of the world up until that kind of point. Right? I'll talk a little bit more about DVDs in a minute. Social media, so this proliferation of platforms like YouTube and that kind of stuff, it's just manna from heaven, right? You just have to choose which ones it is that you're going to go for, and then you see people like Stephen Fry go, you know, God knows how many million Twitter followers. No, I'm going to stop now. I'll just announce I've stopped, right? And they're going to move on to another one. And there's so much flexibility for them to do this, all right, that it is just amazing and can make a lot of money. Broadcast, really sort of struggling to keep pace in many respects with all these things there. So you've seen earlier on all of those shows at the BBC, absolutely at the centre of everything, all right, for the last sort of 50 years, right, really, these things there, right? But then just getting obviously quietly picked off. Not so much by ITV. ITV doesn't really have the broadcast slots to fill the shows with. All right? Channel 4's sharp and I would say wily in a kind of nice way. So you notice that when they nicked, well, perfectly fair, when they nicked Great British Bake Off, right, well, yeah, there we go, fine. Here's a check, fine, because obviously their model is sort of different, right? So they kind of leap around and kind of do that. And Dave on UK TV, their biggest original show is called Taskmaster, right? And Channel 4 just nicked that, right, as well. So Channel 4 are still fighting, and you've seen they've just come under pressure now, right, being announced that they're you know, what role should they have, should they be sold off, right, and the rest of it. Comedy Central has to try and do things internationally, so that challenge that we saw earlier on about trying to commission stuff in there, which is in there. Netflix, well, yeah, Gervais will have you, right, yeah, that'll be great, yeah, this, that, so they can just cherry pick what it is they want. But the latest rumour really is that actually that they're starting to reduce the amount of money that they're investing in comedy, because lots of the comedy talent, right, you know, makes a kind of a gentler version of a British sitcom, right, and therefore it loses its authenticity, and therefore it doesn't quite work. And I suspect, but again don't know, is that Catherine Ryan, right, who has got a huge following, right, as a comedian, right, and writer and what have you, gets commissioned by Netflix. It doesn't get recommissioned for a second sort of series, so it becomes a much more difficult thing. So it's still a very risky kind of space. This was just a couple of other shows. I mentioned Idiot Abroad, the Little Britain guys. So this is about DVD. 1.7 million copies of Little Britain on DVD sold in the 6 weeks up to Christmas when it was released. That's 15 million quid, right? Just looking around the place there. That's why it changed the film business, and it changed the TV business and the comedy business in particular, right, for a wee while. Shows like An Idiot Abroad on Sky, frankly, Sky, not a good platform to then try and get some commercial spin-off of. So Idiot Abroad ran for its 6 weeks, right, in October, November. I released it on DVD. In the following 6 weeks, sold 500,000 copies. Everybody was completely sort of staggered, really. All right, and what had come of age was this format, which was then of such high kind of relatively high quality relative to VHS, right, and so on, with so much added value, right, and the rest of kind of things, right, that people were then tripping over themselves to buy them. And Celebrity Juice, so again, another extraordinary comedian, even if it's not quite your bag as a show, right, but Lee Francis, aka Keith Lemon, right? So I just took a compilation after 6 series of Celebrity Juice, compilation of highlights, nothing big there, popped it out on DVD, sold 500,000 units in 6 weeks. I mean, just quite extraordinary, right, the way in which these things have done. There are so many options, right, on these things there. This is another one called Patreon, right? So fan-based subscription delivery kind of thing there. This is Jason Byrne, right, who I mentioned isn't the first choice on TV, right, for lots of other things there, but is brilliant performer. So the Times regard him as the single best live stand-up performer in the country, right? So he tried this, putting his own content onto this. When you go back to that, what I said before about £15,750, wow, if I could get 300 fans to pay me £5 a month, blimey, that's the same. It's the same kind of more or less. Anyway, Jason Byrne doesn't need to do that. This has been a disaster for him, right? I looked at it last week, 19 people have subscribed to it. So it's a very risky business, even for the greats. Nextup Comedy is a subscription video on demand platform for stand-up comedians that I launched 5 years ago. We've had a couple of £1 million kind of invested. It's doing quite well, right? He said it's based on the premise of the fact that of all of the shows that are up for awards and nominated for awards in Edinburgh and everywhere else, 95% of them are never filmed and therefore never seen again. Right, so we are schmoozing all of those talent, right, to sort of record all of those shows. We've got a couple of hundred right now on our kind of platform, and this last year, right, we've become the leaders in live streaming, right, of kind of comedy. So we streamed the whole of the Leicester Comedy Festival, and so that's all gone kind of quite nicely. So you can do an autobiography, and so I think John sold 1 million copies, right? So that's, you know, there. Here's 10 comedians I'd recommend who you just might not have heard of. And I'll leave that up as opposed to talk through them and blah, 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 blah. But they are all exceptional, right? They're not all young, they're all of different things there. They're not necessarily high profile, right? But take a note of any of those, photograph it or something like that, and I guarantee you, enjoyment from that and enjoyment from the nicknames that I mentioned before. And that's it, right? That's my quick canter through that.